episode 42 part 3 of Kenya's premier sports video podcast, the 3/4 podcast. Jump onto the hashtag Road to Japan to support the Kenya Simbas. As you know, they are still looking to qualify for the Rugby World Cup in 2019 in Japan. And as we are all about promoting sports and sports travel, we've partnered with Moran Sports Travel to give you this brilliant offer for the Dubai Sevens on the 1st and 2nd of December. So for only $999, you get to enjoy your desert safari, your nighttime barbecue, and your Dow cruise. This and much more coming up on your screen.
This is Nash, your official noisemaker.
Jeringus Kenyana.
So as is customary in part 3, we go into sports other than rugby. And we start off with the Premier League.
Exactly, the English Premier League. We're in week 7, going to week 8. Week 7, of course, the notable results for the predicted top 6. Tottenham Hotspurs beat Huddersfield 4-0. Arsenal beat Brighton 2-0. Manchester United are looking very solid. They beat Crystal Palace 4-0. Of course, Liverpool drew with Newcastle 1-1. And the game that was of the weekend, week 7, was Chelsea versus Manchester City. Man City coming out on top, beating Chelsea 1-0 thanks to a Kevin De Bruyne goal at the bridge. By the way, they were playing at the bridge.
Had to play.
We take a break this coming weekend, but week 8 resumes on October 14th. A couple of interesting matchups. We have Watford taking on Arsenal. We have Crystal Palace taking on Chelsea. We have Tottenham Hotspurs hosting Bournemouth. We have Manchester City taking on Stoke City, who are normally a bogey team for the top 6. But the clash of week 8 is the North England derby, Liverpool versus Manchester United, which is going to be at Anfield. I think based on what's happening right now in the English Premier League, Manchester United have the edge, but there's Anfield, there's the Kop, there's the whole atmosphere with Liverpool and football. Therefore, you can never write them off when they take on Manchester United on October 14th.
But this Manchester United uprise, I don't think it's gonna last that much, because the opposition that they've been facing is teams that are in the lower table, lower half of the table. Yeah, beating Crystal Palace 4-0, that was expected. Crystal Palace have not scored a single goal 7 weeks into the Premier League. Yeah, so yet this would be the decider. I think this is when we can actually see the true colours of Manchester United. We'll know if they're actually going to be serious contenders of the Premier League.
But you can't take it away from Manchester United. They've put in a solid show. My issue, of course, at the beginning of the season was whether they were going to gel based on the people they had brought in, Nemanja Matic and of course Romelu Lukaku. But they've been able to strike gold. These guys have actually been scoring goals. Lukaku has scored in almost all his games, all of the games. Some sort of revival in terms of Marwan Fellaini. He scored 2 goals over the weekend. So I don't write off Manchester United, but as Ngusi is saying, the first game against Liverpool, that's going to be the first test of the metal, for lack of a better word. So we wait and see October 14th at Anfield what's going to happen.
And Arsenal is rising, isn't it?
We'll put us down that. Yeah.
All right, now moving on to athletics. You have legendary long distance runner Paul Tergat, who was elected as the president of the National Olympic Committee of Kenya. And then we had our very own, or rather Kenya Rugby's very own. Yes, I'd like to claim that, Humphrey Kayange, who was also elected as one of the athletes' representatives. Anything you have to say on that?
Yeah, it's good to see some young blood now taking over the NOCK, National Olympic Committee of Kenya. Paul Tergat coming in, succeeding the one and the legendary Kipchoge Keino. Yeah, he used to run back in the 60s. Most of us were not even born, or even thought of.
Maybe even our parents weren't born, but anyway.
Yeah, but I think these elections, as much as they did happen, it was marred with a lot of irregularities and issues. There were some court cases that are still on. Even our very own federation, the Rugby Union, we talked about it the last episode about some of the elected officials having not been duly registered. So there's some illegitimacy with how they were allowed to even vote for the NOCK elections. But let's see how it will pan out. But I'm glad that Paul Tergat took over the realms now. Let's see how far he can take the athletics committee.
My issue with I only have one thing about Paul Tergat. There's no doubt he's been an excellent talent, an excellent sportsman for Kenya in middle distance, long distance running, rather long distance running, 10,000 meters and marathon. He was a world marathon record holder at some point. So there's no doubt about his pedigree as an athlete. But it's different. This is management. And that's where the question comes in. There was no doubt about Kipchoge Keino's status. He's been there for 2 decades. What has he done at the National Olympic Committee? So yes, Tergat is a talent. Yes, he's a legend in Kenya. But I hope he's as good as manager as he was an athlete, because we are in management now, and that's where we seem to get it wrong in Kenya, thinking that past athletes are the best managers. Just because you played the game doesn't mean that you're going to be an excellent manager. And I think, like in Europe, in football, I remember someone saying, do you even know about Jose Mourinho's football career, if he ever played? But he's an excellent manager. So my issue is just, is Paul Tergat going to be capable of managing the National Olympic Committee? If he is, then we're going to be good.
Yeah, he could pull us in a Zidane.
How many are they? how many players transform to great coaches? But anyway, that's a discussion for another day.
All right, so now we move on to Formula One, Malaysian Grand Prix.
Yeah, the Malaysian Grand Prix, we had it this past weekend. Coming in third was, let me just go through the results first. Coming in third was Daniel Ricciardo of Red Bull. Second, Lewis Hamilton of the team Mercedes. And surprisingly, it was very shocking that Max Verstappen from the Red Bull team winning the Malaysian Grand Prix. Yeah, this brings it, opens it up for Hamilton, I believe. However, the Malaysian Grand Prix was Vettel's race. This guy came from 20th to 4th. Got a few points, yes, but Hamilton got more points on him. Points now, point difference between him and Hamilton is 34 points. And we have 5 races left. So let's wait and see how it's going to pan out. But my money right now, it's on Lewis Hamilton taking it.
Hamilton leading by 34 points, that is. Yeah, but anyway, it goes back to, I think it echoes what you said at the beginning of the F1 season. It's going to boil down to Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton. And you mentioned that we watch out for Max Verstappen, so I guess he decided to come out at the Malaysian Grand Prix.
Now, year in, year out, we've always got these scandals surrounding the Kenyan sporting space. And for the bonus topic today, the question is, what do you think is hindering Kenya, from realizing its full sporting potential?
Yeah, I think I have a few points on that. Let me start with the leadership. My first point would be, I think, would boil down to leadership. We wouldn't want to have guys who are basically puppets running our various disciplines, guys who are, let's say, financially backed to vie for those positions. Now they have to conduct the financiers' agenda instead of their own. Secondly, the systems that we have in place for our various sports, we'd like to have systems that, especially when it comes to funding, the financial bit, I'd like to see the systems like rugby. Let me use rugby as an example. I like to see rugby being conducted in a way that we do not need the government's money to run rugby. Let's have rugby paying for itself. Let's get sponsors. Let's say, if at all you're going the sponsors' way, let's get them bringing in money and rugby, and then ending up funding its own activities and everything. I'd refer to the Southern Hemisphere rugby situation that is there. These guys have been having a lot of losses. Players have been moving from the south going to the north simply because they're looking for more money there. At the end of the day, we need money in our pockets. So I think the system should be self-funding and very independent that way. We won't have the puppets now. The system becoming puppets. And then, to a larger extent, the public. We are, us guys as fans, I think we could be the largest stakeholders in these sports. Let's get to the stadiums, let's buy the tickets, let's buy the merchandise. And that way we'll help these systems come up. Because at the end of the day, they need money still. I think all my points are going towards money, yeah? But I think we need to get behind our various disciplines. And once we get to that point where, like the north, where we have stadiums always full, I was about to say soccer, a football match. A football match in England, always sold out. Arsenal have the most expensive ticket, but you'll see the stadium is constantly full. If us, the public, can get behind our sports I think we can get them further ahead.
I think just to reiterate what he said, or a bit of what he said before you jump in, is the fact that when you've got people who are passionate about the sport, rather putting the sport first, it cuts out things like greed, which I think is a big factor in, you know, how things go wrong, because someone always wants to make something on the side.
That greed argument, I don't want to go with it just now, because in my other career, one of the first classes I ever had, we were told is that the reason why we have laws is because of the selfish nature of human beings. It's an innate, it's innate in the human being to be selfish. So it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult to get rid of puppets. But I would want to see a point where, if you're going to be getting financial backing to run for these political positions, because this is politics, for lack of a better word, you have to get funding from guys who are actually passionate about sports.
Yes.
Right? It's a return on investment. If I back this, I know this guy is going to place his agendas, and therefore it's going to be a return on investment. As Ngusa said, at the end of the day, it's what comes to the pocket for some of these guys. You have to get guys who are in tandem with that. If the sport grows, then I get more money. And there are those guys. So that's the first issue, which is, of course, ties in with leadership. From the government's point, in terms of leadership and management, I also, because, we might try to get away from the fact that the West do not have government really involved in management of sports, but it does happen in some countries. It happens in France. I mean, we mentioned it in part 2. Bernard Laporte was a former Secretary of Sports of France. It happens in South Africa, for example. What's his name? Fikile Mbalule or something like that. He's the Minister of Sports. But you see, for example, and the best example is the South African guy, Mbalule. He's at every sporting event. A sport person does. I remember when South Africa lost used to Van der Westhuizen, the former scrum of the 1995 Rugby World Cup team. He was there. Whenever there's anything, he's there to accept the team. So he's very passionate about sports himself. Therefore, he's able to do everything that's needed to get sports to where it gets. You see, when politics gets involved in sports, what happens? We talked about it again in part 2 when South Africa are bidding. SARU are not politically backed. Then you see what's happening with rugby in South Africa. So it ties in with what Ngus was saying in terms of you need to get guys who are very passionate about the sports. You want to eradicate some small things like, I mean, we've talked about corruption big time. So I don't think I can add on to that. To move on to the general public, I'm looking at what Ngus is saying in terms of the fans attending these games, because the quickest way to generate revenue just now is through gate sales. That's what Europe did, that's what America did. You generate through ticket sales, and then you get into the other intricacies, merchandise, TV rights and all that. So we also need a lot of work from our fans. We also need a lot of work from our parents. We also need a lot of work from the education system. I think about, like, in the US for a very long time, like, you had to have a college degree or you had to go to college for you to play in the NBA. And those are some of the systems that we need to be put in to realize the full potential. So that if as a parent, I'm quite skeptical about my son or my daughter following sports, at least I have the added advantage, or I have the backing that I know, okay, fine, they're following a sporting career, but they'll have that educational background, which in turn helps them in future. Because unfortunately for the society that we live in right now, it's very heavily education oriented and centered. So it's a two-pronged way. You need the leadership, you need the right leadership in place, you need people who are passionate about these sports, you need people who are going to put in the right policies and legislation in these sports as from the government angle. You need a corporate, you need a private sector that's very interested in sports and can realize the potential that sports has. But on the same hand, you also need people backing these sports people, whether it's the fans going to the stadiums, whether it's their own home settings, people actually supporting these guys and coming to watch these games. So it's a lot of work, but we only hope that what we do at the Three Quarters podcast and what other people are trying to do in terms of sensitizing people about local sports generates the interest that is required, therefore generating the money, therefore, it's a trickle-down thing, and we only hope that can happen going forward.
So guys, that's all we have time for today, but of course we'd love to hear your opinions too. Remember, you can follow us on Instagram, like our page on Facebook, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Jamila Duffield.
This is Ngashi, official noisemaker.
Ngus Kenyana.
See you next week for episode 43.